Good.
Okay, here we go.
Zig Tycho, Ralph Zig Tycho, Zig in the Zone. How are you, Paulie?
Doing really well. How are you doing, Zig?
Oh, couldn't be better. This is a beautiful day in San Francisco. Came in on a commuter bus from Alameda and walked a lot in San Francisco this morning, and I have nothing to complain about. Paulie, how's your back?
Doing better. I'm about 95% better. I'm walking around and don't look like a question mark when I walk. So I'm doing well. Thank you.
Oh,
a
good.
lot better. It took me literally 2 weeks this time almost. Well, a couple days shy of 2 weeks.
Now, I felt guilty for 2 weeks now.
Well, why did you feel guilty? You didn't break my back.
You weren't moving my stuff when...
I won't say that. I won't say that at all. Yeah, I was moving your stuff.
Were you really?
Yeah, I was moving your stuff. And guess which box it was? Your favorite box, the heavy box.
The light.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
But that's okay. But so it wasn't even that I was lifting it, Zig. It was really that I was sliding it. I was sliding it back towards the back of the car, but what I had done is I had reached and stretched wrong.
Oh, wow.
And so it wasn't even lifting, it was sliding. And it was literally that I had bent the wrong way. I bent with my back, not my knees, or
right. Or
didn't protect
versa.
myself. And the silly thing is I literally could had opened the side door and pushed it. But,
Wow.
I'm being a tall, long guy thinking I can just reach in and, move it, but not a chance.
Okay.
So, yeah, but better now. Thank you. I appreciate it. What's happening with you? How are you doing?
Well, it's spring training, and I'm kind of psyched about that. I've listened to a few games on the radio. The Mets are still struggling to sign whatever pitcher they do sign, Montgomery or Seeley, but it just makes sense that they, especially with the injury to Senga, it just makes sense that they sign one of those two players. Stevie has a lot of money, and Uncle Stevie, the owner, and I hope they'll do that. We have a terrific show. I don't know if I've ever talked to you, Paulie, about Ian Kahanowitz.
No. Tell me about Ian.
Ian Kahanowitz is an attorney, an author, a baseball maven, and has been a contributor and a major part of the Comfortably Zoned radio network for all this time.
Right.
And it's especially gratifying to have him as the first guest today because his spirit is incredible. We are of two different lifestyles, of two different ideologies in some ways, but we seem to mesh in a way that supersedes all of that. And I can't wait. We're going to talk about one of my favorite topics and an ongoing topic of my podcast network is loving baseball when we were 12 and innocent. And we're going to find out what it was when Ian was 12 and innocent. I know he's a New Yorker, and I remember vividly that he's a Yankee fan. So he's going to tell us all about that. And that is a wonderful way I've found to getting to know the guest. what it was when they were 12 and what it was that kept their passion going in baseball. Because I know he's kept it all his life. He's been a baseball author. And it's my philosophy that when you're 12 in age, and you're going to baseball games, suddenly enthusiasm meets intellect. You almost know what's going on, and you want to know more. So I'm going to ask Ian what books he read at that time, what music he listened to. I want to know a little bit more about baseball, and what led him to the life he's leading now about baseball. Now, that's the first segment. The second segment, I've got Brian Riley, who wrote a novel about one of my favorite sports teams of all time, the New York Rangers. And I really want to know from Brian where his passion started for hockey and how he came about writing the book.
Right.
So we've got much to talk about today.
And we're almost ready to dive in with them, right? So.
We are indeed, but I want to know, give you a little plug with your Edge Studio thing where we're sitting right now. You have done such a terrific job with Edge in converting my gig of a podcast to a video podcast. How did that come about?
I basically retrofitted you.
Okay.
I retrofitted you. I took this analog man and threw him into the digital world.
Oh.
You were once a standard definition guy. Now you're 1080p 4K zooming through the stratosphere.
I think Zoom is a way to get in contact with people. That's all I know. I am literally your prototype dinosaur.
Oh,
and
well, if I can teach you how to do it, right?
Yeah, if you can. We're still waiting for that, and I do it with joy. Learning it from you has become a joy. We try to make this show. This is number 7. We try to change it, tweak it a little bit to make it a little bit better. And just when we think we have it as good as it's going to get, we make it a little better than that. So, and that's, Paulie, that's your philosophy. Looks like we've got Ian.
Ian's going to be on in just a moment. We're going to see if we can get him to turn his device sideways so we can get him in landscape mode. Look at this guy. See,
wow.
He's got the auto correction. He knows what's happening in this world.
He's a quick learn, my Ian Kahanowitz.
I'm telling you. So why don't you bring him in as only you can, Mr. Zig?
Comfortably Zoned Radio. He was the Ian Kahanowitz to Comfortably Zoned Radio. He was our what's the word? He was our
color commentator?
No, he was our basic and I'm losing it here a little bit.
Are you getting
whatever he was?
Cutting in?
It's not the first time. Ian is listening.
Let's do this. Let's ask Ian.
He's a Renaissance man. He's an attorney. He's a baseball author. He's an interviewer. He's one of the most interesting people going. Ian Kahano, say hello. How are you?
It's always good to see you, Ralphie.
I'm sorry, I'm just so verdregt today, but I'm excited about having you. We're going to talk about something that's going to get the listening audience to know you like nothing else can. What were you like at age 12? Loving baseball came about that time, and you were 12 and innocent. And how has that changed loving baseball? Who took you to your first game? How did you become a Yankee fan? And I know you are. And how did you get, who inspired the passion in your life that carries over to everything you do? And I'm curious about that.
Well, you know, Ralph, my father was a very, very big Yankee fan. And of course, when you grew up in New York like you did, and you grew up in the heyday, the golden age of baseball, where every year it would be the Giants or the Dodgers or the Yankees in the World Series. You know, New York was the golden age of baseball in the 1950s. And so my father grew up, I mean, he was born in 44. He grew up and he was a diehard Yankee fan. And you know, my earliest recollections are from like 3 years old when Fritz Peterson had the switch with his wife. And, you know, the first few Yankees that I knew of was Mantle, DiMaggio, Greg Nettles, Fritz Peterson, Mel Stottlemyre, Roy White, and Thurman Munson. And I think we start there. I do recall in 1976 when the Yankees won the pennant for the first time in 12 years. And I remember being 6 years old, and I remember seeing Gay Paul, George Steinbrenner, and Billy Martin on TV because I heard my father screaming when Chris Chambliss hit the home run, and of course I must have been sleeping. And 47 years later from that, I helped induct Gay Paul into the Cincinnati Reds Hall of Fame last year. I had a trip out to Cincinnati. You
Wow.
know, I sat with Johnny Bench and Pete Rose and Tony Perez and all those wonderful guys. And so
Hey,
that
and
was my
adjust
early.
your camera a little bit so we get you full. There you go.
There,
That's much.
look at you're a director, Zig.
Look at that. I've come a
I
long
was
way.
gonna say that too. Thank you
Um,
very much.
wow. I'm so proud of
Ah,
that. Um, tell me about Gabe Paul's induction.
you know, it was a
He got
magical.
close
It was.
again. He got close again.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm doing it from here. I'm doing it from afar. But I gotta hold my phone. You know, maybe I should like hold it. How's this? Is this better?
We love the inside of your palm. There we go.
That's better.
Oh,
That's
all
better.
right.
We'd love to see you moving around. At your
Oh,
age, moving around means a lot. And
it
you're
does.
younger than me.
But Gay Paul last summer, you know, I was able to write the speech for his daughter Jenny Paul. You know, I was there with the whole Paul family, and finally, after all this time, he got his due. You know, he was the vice president of the club in the 1950s. He brought on stars as Frank Robinson and Veda Pinson and all those guys. And he really, like Branch Rickey, was a pioneer, especially when it came to the minor leagues and expanding baseball, especially into Cuba before the Castro Revolution. Gay Paul believed that the minorities, like you know, at the time, like Willie Mays and those guys, were a core institute that would make baseball better. And for many years, the National League was better. And you could see it in the 60s with the St. Louis Cardinals when he beat the Yankees, when they beat the Yankees in 64. And what was very, very strange was that in 76, when Gabe Paul's Yankees played the Big Red Machine, it was Paul who brought on Pete Rose and Tony Perez. So for him, it was a very, very weird place to be in 76. On the other side, because Cincinnati he was there for from 1938 to 1961. But his accomplishments are immeasurable. They were going to move the Reds to New York when when the Dodgers and Giants left. The Mets weren't created yet. The National League wanted to fill a void because New York was the place to be. It was a moneymaker,
Yeah,
you
there
know.
were a
And
lot of rumors about teams move. Pittsburgh was rumored at one time to be moving. Um, just wasn't going to happen. And you mentioned Branch Rickey. He created the Continental League, which
He
led to
did.
expansion. Would you elaborate on that a little bit?
The Continental League, I think, was in 1959. Again, Branch Rickey did a stint with the Dodgers, which we all know, and then Pittsburgh. But by the late 50s, he was getting older, and again, baseball was more political. So he created the Continental League to be in competition with Major League Baseball. Now, it's almost like you go back 40 years before, you had the Federal League of Baseball during the dead ball era, and they were a little bit more successful than the Continental League. The Continental League, I believe, lasted only 1 year. The Federal Leagues during the dead ball era took a lot of players. In fact, when they came back to Major League Baseball during the 19 teens, their records were not added on to their Major League Baseball stint. So a lot of the people like Eddie Plank, they're in the Hall of Fame, but their records from the Federal League were not added to Major League Baseball. Continental League started and ended as quickly as it came. It could not compete with
No,
Major League Baseball.
it wasn't a matter of competing. It was a matter of forcing expansion. And
That's
if
right.
it weren't for the Continental League, there would be no New York Mets. But let's go back a little further with Branch Rickey. You mentioned he started with the Dodgers, went to Pittsburgh. No, he started with the old St. Louis Browns.
And that's in the 1920s.
And he ended up building the farm system of the St. Louis Cardinals, which led to all those great years. And he was by far the brains of Major League Baseball.
And he was.
He transcended everything.
And again, look at the Cardinals. I mean, in the 20s, he was instrumental in building the minor league teams, or farm teams as they were called. And Gay Paul, and he took notice of it, and he met Rickey a few times, and he understood what Rickey knew, because there was no free agency at the time. The Yankees knew, and the Cardinals knew, that if you grew your hometown club from within in different places geographically in the United States, and you get the scouts out there and you have great farm teams, you're going to build a winning team. And both St. Louis, the Yankees, the Dodgers, even Pittsburgh in the 1920s, they were all adhering to Rickey's record, saying you get these kids and you build up your farm team, and eventually they all become majors, or most of them for that matter.
Okay. Let me ask you a question. If baseball weren't your passion, what would it be?
Oh, I think history and law, because right now I went back to practicing law after 25 years. I think you see my posts. Right now I have a case going up to the second highest court in Massachusetts coming up on Friday, trying to change the law in Massachusetts regarding parenting time and religion. So, like, say we have Rosh Hashanah, you need 7 days off, or 8 days for Yom Kippur. You don't have to bargain for that when divorce or parenting time is warranted. It should be an automatic. Massachusetts doesn't have that law. And so I'm going on Friday to do it. I'm very passionate about human rights. I'm very passionate about history. I think you could see it in my books. I think you could see it on the programs I had when I was part of the Comfortably Zoned network, because there is nothing. You see everything that goes on today with politics and all this stuff. This is no different than the 1800s. It's just in a more modern world. Everything is divided. But you need to know your history, and more than anything else, you need to voice your opinion as an American citizen. And I think those are my passions.
Okay. What would you do differently in your career if you had to go back on it all?
In my career, I think I would have been more independent. When you get out of law school, you're very, very green, and you had to rely on the partners of a law firm to teach you, and it's a very, very difficult apprenticeship. They treat you worse than a human. They yell at you. They cut up whenever you write. They scream at you to call you every name. And at the time, in my 20s, I didn't realize that just building character, because in this business, you need alligator skin. And so what I would have done differently is not take it personal. If I knew what I knew now, and I'm sure a lot of people will think that, I would have had many more years as a litigator rather than leaving that aspect of law to become vice president of major banks and doing corporate law. Now that I'm back in it, I have no one else to tell me what to do, and the learning is a lot easier for me because I'm not as nervous. I'm not scared to go to trial. I've had 5 trials last year for the first time in 25 years. I think that's what I would do differently. I think I would have I would have let failure in. Neil Young has said, look, if you let failure in, if you embrace failure, you have nothing to worry about because all the fear is gone, but you got to let it in. That's what I didn't do.
What will you I know you have twin sons.
I do.
What will you pass on about your business experience to your kids?
I think right now they both have both passions for sports. Now Jacob likes soccer, running. He likes the alternative sports, like the international sports, like cricket. And polo, and especially soccer. I mean, he'll watch international soccer, and he has an Italian soccer shirt, and he has Italian hats, and he just loves the World Cup, and he loves the World Cup finals. Ryan, on the other hand, is a big football guy. He's a big baseball guy. He's a big basketball guy. He gets ready for the brackets coming up in the college hoops. He watches the bowl games with me. He's more akin to the kind of sports, that. But business sense, both of them are great in almost every subject. They're both good, honest students. Brian has more of a preference for law and history, like me. Jacob is not as outgoing or more introverted, so he's more or less like a backroom kind of guy. So my business sense is this: you see what I do on a daily basis. There's a whole world out there. If you pick and choose to do what I do, you're swearing an oath on the Constitution of the United States. And if you're going to do it, you got to do it wholeheartedly. It's none of this stuff where you lollygag it or, you commit crimes like most attorneys do or commit malpractice. It's not for the faint of heart, but it's a labor of love.
Okay. What did you get from your parents that you passed on to your kids?
Well, I grew up in a very dysfunctional house.
Didn't we all?
No, but mine was a little bit more, my father was a deadbeat father. I was left in abject poverty in Brooklyn, New York. We were on welfare. I didn't have a chance. The only thing I think I passed on, because I got rid of most of those moral values that were instilled in me. I think the thing I did pass on was a love of sports. And I think my father showed me that. That's one of the few good memories I have of him. I passed on because I didn't work hard and they wanted free handouts. And a lot of the things I had to acquire myself. My home life wasn't really settled until I met my wife. And after that it became different.
Tell me about her and how she affected your life.
Oh, it's so at 25, I was in law school and I met her and she wasn't Jewish and no one had ever married out of the faith. And the 400 and something years, you could trace it back to Russia for me. And I said, well, something. This is a woman who has the highest moral ethics that there can possibly be. And in 1995, we started dating and I had to make a choice. Because my religion wouldn't permit me to marry someone who's not Jewish. And I've never met anyone like her, all my in-laws for that matter. They're from the old country. And when I got married, they just treated me as their own. And all my brother-in-laws and sister-in-laws, and she has a big family. They all treat me as an equal, and it filled that void within me that I so missed as a child. I cannot say enough. People complain about their in-laws and stuff. I had the best in-laws. I mean, peasants from World War II Italy. They made it through, and we have 2 acres of farmland. We do 200 jars of tomatoes. We farm the land. We till the land. They believe in hard work, and they believe in eating well, and they believe in family. And I think those are the values that I learned from them, which I'm passing to my kids.
What are their spiritual beliefs? Are they Christian, Jewish,
Well, the thing is
atheist?
this: it's funny. It's funny you say that. Jacob is a very worldly person, so he knows he has Jewish roots. And one of the things that's an interesting thing, because what I did was I converted to Catholicism, and a lot of Jewish people have problems with that. They call me a traitor. I mean, they sat shiva for me. Like I died when I got married. They took my little leaf off for the bar mitzvah that I got in my temple. Jacob knows he's from Jewish blood, and we celebrate every Jewish holiday, just like Jesus did, and every Jewish holiday. And we have the whole thing with the Seder plate, and we read the Haggadah, and we do, everything from, the egg to the bitter herbs to the Seder, to the whole Passover meal. When Rosh Hashanah comes, it's the same thing for the New Year. Hanukkah comes, and we're all making latkes, even my wife, and it's a blend. They were brought up Catholic, but they're not aligned with it. They are right now in a place I was in my mid-teens, and that is exploration. And whatever they want to be, or whatever they choose, I don't drum it in. You have to do this, so you have to do that. It's a spiritual thing. You're gonna find it yourself. You just can't rely on your parents for that, and you can't rely on others for that. It's within you. It's what you feel.
What does your wife contribute to the family thing?
What is my wife? What?
What does she contribute to the upbringing of the kids? How?
Oh, so what? Oh my God, my wife is a tough one. She is very strict. Religion, not so much. When she was younger, they were put into church. Now she's a lot more laid off. She is of the opinion and of the belief you have to work hard. She is no nonsense. Keep your nose out of the gutter. Keep away from drugs or vaping or cigarettes or alcohol. She is like she's like a warrior when it comes to that, and don't do stupid things, and don't make these mistakes. And she's a very, very strict but good mom. The kids absolutely adore her. I'm not as strict as she is. The only thing I'm strict in is education. And my kids showed me at a very young age that they have the capacity to get all A's. And that's my only thing. I said, if you get an A, if you're less than an A, there has to be a reason for it. And you better have a damn good one. They get all A's. They do a lot. I said, you people could go farther than me. I came from abject poverty. My thing is education. I believe my wife does everything else to shape that moral compass.
Okay. How did you get from abject poverty to law school? I mean, you came out of it's 1,000 to 1 odds against.
This is what happened, Ralph. I had to go to work in a supermarket, earning $3.35 an hour in 1986. No one paid for my college. So I went through Brooklyn College in New York. I came out. I worked in a bank because I was good in school, and I was in the management training program, Chase Manhattan Bank. And for 1 year, I saved my money, and I got a car, and I moved to Massachusetts, and I went to law school, and a lot of people failed out, and I said failure is not an option here, and I just busted my hump, really. And I worked hard, and by 1996, I was a member of the Massachusetts Bar. It's hard work. It's a lot of luck, but it's dedication. And like anything else, George Foreman once said, we all have dreams. Eventually, if you work on it, you'll get there. And I think that's true for anything. And I think that's true for me in my younger years. That's exactly what happened.
Okay. How would you change the law if you could?
There's many aspects of the law that I would change. A lot of these laws that are out here, first of all, we have a Supreme Court that has just gone rogue. I do not like to debate politics, but after 50 years to undo Roe versus Wade,
How could that have happened? Now, that's a rhetorical question, but in today's day and age, can you give me some rhyme or reason how womanhood could have given that up?
Womanhood didn't give it up. What happens is this: you have a very huge divide in this country. Okay, when Franklin Roosevelt came to the presidency, one of the problems he had was a Supreme Court that was very conservative and that was just ruling that all of his TWA, all those, the alphabet soup that he was trying to help the Depression with, were all getting ruled that they weren't unconstitutional. And he said, well, look, I got to change something. He tried to pack the court with liberal justices. That didn't work. But soon enough, those conservative justices left. And he was able to shape the court with Douglas and Black and all those guys. And it lasted until 1975. So he had 30 years, really. Well, 40 years of liberal justices. And you saw it growing up with the Warren Court. And there's progress made. And the old God was dying. And when Nixon came, he wanted to impeach Douglas and Abe Fortas, who had to resign. And he said he's going to roll the court back. But even the justices that he put on besides, what was his name? He became Chief Justice. They did not roll back the Roosevelt. Rehnquist was the only one who was always in the dissent. So what happens is now you go 40 years later. So now you got Obama, you got the Tea Party, and now politics are even worse than when George W. was president in the early 2000s. And now you got a government where it's either all liberal or all, right wing. And so Mr. Trump comes to, 2015, you got Scalia, who dies, and Barack Obama was supposed to put a justice on, and you had a Republican Congress, and they said, no, we're gonna hold this to the election. Now, if you go back in history, Antonin Kennedy was put on during a election year. That was just highway robbery. So what they do, Trump becomes president, he puts on Gorsuch, who's brilliant, but he's living back in the 1700s. Then the whole Kavanaugh thing, we all watched it on TV, and then Amy Cohen Barrett. And those three sided with Thomas, who was on the original challenge in Planned Parenthood versus Casey in 1992, which was going to roll back Roe versus Wade, but Justice O'Connor said we can't do this, and she got David Souter, Antonin Kennedy to form a consensus and save the right to abortion. This time we didn't have it. We did not have that. So the conservative justices, Alito, O'Connor lobbied against Alito because when Planned Parenthood versus Casey came up to the Supreme Court, Alito was on the Washington court at the time, who wanted to overrule it. So when Bush nominated him, he was nominating justices that would side with Thomas, and they got three more, and now you got the Chief Justice who literally is almost like Charles Haddon Hughes in the 30s. You got to weigh the liberals and the conservatives here and make a decision, and he's having a hard time in his 19th year as Chief Justice, and that's how it happened. a lot of civil rights are going to be moved back because you have justices who are strict constructionalists, which means if it's not in the Constitution, it's not going to be an American society. And then you have those like the liberal justices, like Sotomayor, who's a huge Yankee fan, and Kagan, and the new one, who believe in Brandeis. The Constitution is elastic. It will change as society moves into the future. But these conservative justices, like, it's not in there, doesn't matter, it's 1787, we're going to overrule it even in 2023.
Okay. Do you see this Supreme Court really queering all the trials, all the allegations against Trump? Are they, when it all comes to it, are they just going to say enough is enough? We've got, like Ford did with Nixon, we've got to heal as a country.
The problem with U.S. versus Nixon was that there was only one person who recused himself from the case, and that was Rehnquist. He saw himself that he would be biased in this. U.S. v. Nixon, the only reason why he resigned Nixon is because when he gave the tapes to the Supreme Court, when it was subpoenaed, there was a lot of blackouts in it. You know, Nixon took Johnson's advice. Johnson only taped in the Oval Office, but Nixon was so paranoid that every room, even the bathroom, was bugged. And so when the Supreme Court ordered the tapes, when he ordered the tapes, he knew that he was a crook. So he resigned. The only way Nixon was going to get exonerated is if he was pardoned. And that's what happened with Ford. Now, this is a different story. You got 3 Supreme Court justices that were put on the court by Trump. And those 3 should recuse themselves. If they recuse themselves, the liberals are going to win and Trump will be socked. If I was the Chief Justice, I'd order those 3 to recuse themselves in the fairness of law because they are connected to Trump. And otherwise, I can't see the Supreme Court doing anything on Trump with those 3 on.
Well, then, if it all holds up, we could have a future president who's going to be in the White House, but he's going to be in jail. That could happen.
It could, and there's no laws. Now, you see, very interesting. When William Henry Harrison died in 1840, I think it was, you had John Tyler Senate president. There was no laws at the time, so they didn't even acknowledge him as president. Here, what we're going to do is say he's in jail. Would the vice president take over, or can he do his duties from jail? There's no law regarding that. Congress would have to initiate something saying, well, if you're indicted or if you can't be president. But that's why he's winning in every state now, because there's no laws. He's free to do what he wants, even though he owed $437 million, which he's appealing. And what astounds me is this. If you remember the 1988 presidential campaign, you remember Gary Hart?
Mm-hmm.
He had an affair, and his career was ruined. Trump, the amount of things that he has done, and yet we're now in 2024 that he's still here, astounds me. It's like, where has the moral compass gone?
Where has it gone that his supporters still support him? Each time he's indicted, his popularity grows.
It's almost something out of a fascist kind of thing. Like, I would never compare Trump to Hitler or Mussolini or, Franco, but historically, when these guys were put in jail, their popularity grew through writings, through media. Look, it's being oppressed, and for some reason, people just love him. They don't. I'm always of the opinion, Ralph. It doesn't matter who the candidate is. It's what your core beliefs are. What most people should do, what I do is you look at each candidate and you see what they stand for. And whatever they stand for has to align with what you stand for. But what they know, all politicians, is that this is not a game of what you believe or not. It's how good you look to them. And that's a dangerous thing because you're voting for a candidate that has none of your issues, your core values, because he looks good on a podium or you like the way he's brashly talking or, ripping the other side. And there's so many people that criticize liberals and I'm like, you have liberal ideas. You don't even know what you're talking about. And that's a problem. That's brainwashing. That's not voting. That's not voting for what you believe. That's voting impartially. When you watch all this on TV and they make it like a drama series, and that's so wrong.
Ian, what do you think of Robert Kennedy Jr.?
Well, if he's anything like they have the Kennedy family, believe it or not, they've had a million problems, as you well know. When I took a poll a few years ago, now remember I moved to Massachusetts. Ted Kennedy was my senator for 20 years until he passed. When I took a test to see who I would be most politically aligned to, Ted Kennedy came up. I believe that Kennedy would have those kind of political values that John had, or Bobby had, or Ted had, and he would move it forward. I would definitely think that he'd be a good candidate just on the issues. The problem is it's not 1960. I wasn't around in 60. You were, Ralphie. And you had your black and white TV, and you had a charismatic guy like Kennedy on TV saying what he's going to do, and you had Nixon, who was the vice president at the time, and he just was a dud. He just was a dud. But again, you didn't have the internet at the time to say, well, what does Nixon stand for? He's going to carry the things from Eisenhower over. Kennedy's talking a good game, but today you go onto the internet and you see all the political views and you may be able to make a choice. I don't know necessarily if Kennedy would have won the 60 election if there was an internet back then. Now, Kennedy, down here, Kennedy has the advantage of actually having an internet because we're so divided politically. You go on his website, you see what he stands for. You'd vote for him if you're liberal or Democratic. It's hard to put a name to the Democratic Party these days, Ralph. It's not the same Democratic Party, say under Lyndon Johnson. Today the Democrats are a hodgepodge of different factions that do different issues. The Republicans are either Trumpites, right wingers, or conservative, and it seems that the right is leaning more and more into GOP. But the Democrats, are very divided. I think the 2020 election showed Bernie Sanders, who had a lot of great ideas. He graduated my alma mater, James Madison, just like Tory did. But they weren't ready for socialistic, programs like free healthcare or free education. So they got Biden in there. And, Biden was a better choice than Trump, in my opinion, only because I align with the Democratic Party's issues. But I think that if Trump becomes president, it's going to be a really tragic moment in American political history.
Yeah. Ian, if you were a betting man, what would you bet?
Right now on the presidential race?
Yeah.
I'd still bet. I still throw my money on Biden. You know something? I don't think. I mean, there are diehard Trumpites that never left since 2016, 2014 when he started gathering steam. I'm a better man. I'd still bet on Biden.
Okay.
Only because a lot of people who voted for Trump in 2016 were so turned off that by 2020 they didn't vote. Now again, it was the both of those guys, Biden and Trump, had the most votes ever in history. So Trump beat his 2016, but people went out to the polls just to vote against Trump. Um, I think those who he turned off or those who he disappointed might be the factor rather than the swing states of like Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan. Um, Politically, Trump offends a lot of people, and that was his coach Bannon's plan. Listen, we know there's a demographic of those who don't like this section of American society, and this is what we're going to target. It's almost like sales. And so when he gets up there and he bashes liberalism and he bashes this, you're getting a lot of supporters that way. But you're also isolating those who do not believe in those targeted areas that Trump has. And that's what I'm betting on.
Okay. Hey, let's get back to the candy store of life. What are the Yankees going to do this year?
They might make the playoffs. They do need some pitching. Their pitching is suspect. I like Soto, but Giancarlo Stanton is a wild card. I like Verdugo. I like the replacements they got. If pitching stays healthy, if Nestor Cortez can return to form, if Rodden can pitch up to what he's being paid, I like what's his name they got from the Cubs. I think he's a good pitcher. They got extra meat in the bullpen. They could make the wild card. I don't think they're going to make. I don't think they're going to make. They're going to win the East. They're not strong enough. I like Baltimore. I like Toronto's rebuilding. The Dodgers, I think, are a little cuckoo and spending all the money on Otani and Yamamoto there from Japan. Free agency has shown you just can't pay all that money, build a ball club, and win it all. There has to be chemistry. Steinbrenner was only successful in the 70s. By the 80s, he wasn't winning pennants anymore. The 90s Yankee was a conglomerate of Paul O'Neill coming to the Yankees and Jimmy Key coming to the Yankees.
You mentioned Gabe Paul. I don't think the Yankees would have won without him.
Gabe Paul built the 70s Yankees. At the time, Steinbrenner had made illegal contributions to the Nixon campaign and forced his workers in the shipping industry to do so. And so he was banished in baseball by Bowie Kuhn, the commissioner, and it was up to Gabe Paul to build the franchise, which he did. Steinbrenner hooted and hollered, but Nettles, all those guys that he got prior to Reggie. He didn't want Reggie. That was all Steinbrenner. By that time, Steinbrenner wasn't in the doghouse, but he got Willie Randolph. He got all those guys, Chris Chambliss, Dick Tidrow. He built a team because he knew baseball. And then when free agency came, this is even before free agency, when Jim Hunter was set free only by a technicality in his mutual fund with Finley, Steinbrenner said, go get him. And Paul really wanted Jim Hunter. Great pitcher. Probably, if you ask Al Clark, Hunter was probably the best pitcher he's ever seen. And he got him. And then when free agency opened up, they got Reggie Jackson. But until that time, he built the Yankees. It was him that I even told the people in Cincinnati that built the Yankee juggernaut of the 70s. The guy was brilliant. There's no question about it. He made 500 trades in his tenure as general manager from the 1940s well into the 1980s until his last stop in Cleveland. The guy drank baseball. I speak to his daughter Jenny almost every day, just like I do Irene Hodges. And it's amazing what I've learned about people. And being that 6-year-old little boy, seeing and not even knowing, say, who's that old man? And to get him writing a brief to the Hall of Fame, it was one of the great honors. And something I'll never forget, that I was able to get him into the Hall of Fame. He deserves it. And unfortunately, I hate the owners. I think the owners are destroying baseball. I think that Manfred has really hurt baseball by changing the rules and changing the formats, all to make money. And again, it's all about
which
the venue.
which rules do you hate the most?
Which rules do
I only really hate one of them. And
I hate a lot of them. I don't think there should be a pitch clock. I think when I asked Pete Rose, when I sat with him for 7 hours at the Cincinnati game, I said, Pete, there can never be a time where Bob Fosse's standing in front of the plate and then you do barreling into him. And that was an all-star game. They have to stand off, and they can't block the plate. You're taking 100 years of doing that and throwing it through the window. Pitch clock? What the hell is that? This is a thinking man's game. This is not, hockey where there's continuous action. This is a thinking man's game, and they're only appealing so that they could get money in. That's wrong. You're ruining baseball this way. They said the same thing in '73 when they got a designated hitter. Mm-hmm. Well, guess what? Politics played a part. Now the National League has it. And guess what, Ralphie? Tickets are higher, but so is attendance because everyone loves the long ball.
Well, the attendance is coming from the corporates, and the kids are being denied, but that's for another show. Ian, tremendous talking to you. You're a great guy. And you've been a boon, the cornerstone, one of the cornerstones of Comfortably Zone Network. So thank you, my friend.
Well, Ralphie, I love you. You're the man.
I'm easy to love, but difficult to like. How about that?
Casey. Remember Casey Stegler? You're always...
Yes, I do.
He always said, look, in the 1950s, he used to tell the press, you know what? I don't go into any game without my man. And you know who his man was?
Who's that?
Yogi Berra. Yogi Berra was his man. And I always say to people, I don't go into the game without my man. My man is Ralph Tycho, the Zig Man.
Well, let me ask you this about Yogi Berra. How come he didn't get the job when Casey retired and Westrom did? How do you explain that?
He didn't get the job, Yogi, in 1960. Wait a minute. Were we talking with the Mets? Or no? We're talking the Yankees in 60.
With the Mets.
Casey. With the Mets? Well, that's a good question. I have no idea. I think, a lot of people saw Berra as a failure from 64. During the World Series, CBS was negotiating with the guy sitting across Kane from Johnny Keane. He's as the Yankees and the Cardinals were going through. It's one of the biggest black marks on base. As Yogi and them were going to 7 games, they already hired Johnny Keane.
Yep, and it took Yogi a long time to get back to Yankee Stadium. Hey, thank you, Ian. We'll talk to you again real soon. I want your promise that you'll come back periodically and give us your time. You're
you just invite me, Ralphie, and I'll be right here, pal.
Okay, I will. And we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Take care, folks. It's been great.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us again, Ian.
You're welcome. It was my pleasure.
You got it,
as
buddy.
always.
All right, guys. We're back here live in studio. It's one of those things we do.
We have another good show coming up, another good segment coming up with talk about the New York Rangers. You weren't a hockey fan growing up, but I was.
I like watching hockey because it's action packed, but I did not grow up in a household that watched hockey.
I appreciate that, and it became very difficult for me to follow hockey when I came out to California. But we'll have a great show. Why don't you put on our little slideshow?
Which one you want to do? You want to do My Alameda or?
Yeah, let's do My Alameda. See how that's looking.
All right. Let's see here.
So I want to talk a little bit about my hometown today. Last week, I gave a shout out to what I consider to be the best 420 dispensary in Northern California.
Right.
Park Street Social. They were appreciative, and it was kind of the talk of the group down there. I'm going to take some videos of Park Street Social and bring them in for next week's show. And today I just wanted to give you a different business that I'm calling attention to, a different shout out.
Okay.
They are McGee's Bar and Grill in downtown Alameda.
Okay.
They are a sports bar and grill, and they were nice enough to host my book signing a while back. Comfortably Zoned in Nevada Pine Tar, the book I wrote with George Grimm.
Right.
And I was very appreciative of them, given the fact that I wrote the majority of the book while using that sports bar. And I don't drink, but I'd go there and catch up. They have 9 TVs, and I'd use them as this was before the internet took over, where you could get any game on television.
Right.
And McGee's provided me with an atmosphere where I could keep up with the sports world while writing the book. So I'm going to give my Zig In The Zone heads up to go into McGee's and tell them Zig sent you, and they'll treat you no better, no worse than they treat me. And that's all I could tell you. Wonderful people. Say hello to Timmy for me. He's the owner, and that's my my shout out about Alameda today. And play that slideshow if you would.
I did, just there while you were talking about it. Wasn't that great?
Oh, wow. I didn't get to see it. But,
it was right up in the corner. It was right above, right there where you were looking. There it was. All right, we're going to take a short break, and then we'll be right back, literally right back.
All right, guys, it's time to take a break. We'll be back right after this.
Thank you for that nice welcome, Paulie.
Not a problem. I'm glad we're back here right after our break. And who do you got with us this time?
Brian Riley. It looks like he's coming up. How you doing, Brian?
I'm doing great. Ralph, pleasure to meet you. Paul, pleasure. Thank you for having me on, guys.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
Brian, you come highly recommended by George Grimm as a guest. You're the first guest I've ever had. We've done 7 episodes. First guest that I've ever had that I didn't know. So it's really a challenge, and I'd like to welcome you to the airwaves. Brian.
Thank you.
All right. All
Yeah.
right. Brian, you're a Ranger fan, obviously. You wrote a novel about the Rangers. You've got what I call the Walter Mitty in you. I see you smile, and you'll agree to that. How did it come that you wrote a novel about my favorite hockey team when I was growing up, the New York Rangers?
Yeah. So I've always wanted to write, and I've had a great career in sports licensing and marketing. And when that ended, I, as a hobby, I've been doing some short stories that are unpublished. And one day at a game several years ago, my son and I are watching the Jumbotron, and they're showing all these old photos through the years of the Rangers. And because of my long career in sports, I have a pretty good sense of who players are, even, the older guys. But they were showing a bunch of Ranger players in sepia tone photos. I had no idea who these guys were, Ralph. No idea at all. So I went home that night and looked it up, and names like Taffy and Ching and Raffles and Bunny. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, I got to find out who these guys are.
Okay, now
So that was the start of the idea of doing some research.
well, how about we get to the point of I ask you, who took you to your first hockey game, and what was that about?
So my first hockey game didn't come until college. I had a roommate, Mark, who was a huge Ranger fan, and I'm a Chicago Cub fan. So at the time, both of us kind of commiserated our miseries together. And it was up in Rochester, New York. So Buffalo not being too far away, he'd want to go catch some Ranger games. And so he would drag me along for that. And that's when that was absolutely the first time I ever saw a hockey game played. Growing up, didn't really have any exposure to hockey at all. Grew up in New York, but in the northern suburbs up across from West Point, in a little town called Cold Spring. And, played a little pond hockey for sure, but growing up, we didn't have any ability to watch games on television with any regularity. They were, back in those days, that was a different way of watching a game, I suppose, if at all. So really wasn't until college that I got introduced to the Rangers. And then after my son was born, in 1996, when he was old enough to start skating, I decided I wanted to learn to play myself. So when I was already 30-something years old, I put on skates and started to learn how to play hockey.
Wow. Wow. How'd that work out?
I still play. I just turned 59, and I'm still trying to get out there as often as I can to play. But I thought that was, as I was doing the research for the book, that was one of the things that gave me a little advantage, I think, in writing it, is that I was able to write it from the perspective of what it's like to actually be on the ice and give that excitement of, what are the conversations like on the bench, jumping over the boards, getting into the action. And so it all came together.
Who was your technical advisor in your head when you wrote the novel about hockey?
I would have to say the internet. No, the technical advisor in terms of what the rules were like in 1926, or
what the mores were in hockey, how players related. As a long-term hockey fan, as a kid, I know that there's something great about hockey's personality, the personality of your average hockey player. They are not like they are on the ice. They are off the ice. They are warm and gentle people. I went down for a lot of autographs in my day as a kid, and the hockey players were always the nicest to the kids. They'd sit with you, they'd talk to you. They weren't offended by New Yorkers. They're mostly Canadians, but it's just terrific memories. Uh, what was it like writing the book and finding out how these hockey players were like, what they were like? What did you
Yeah.
find them to be like?
So I first started off doing a lot of my research at the New York Public Library. So this was great, and I'm happy to tell you about it. I would go into the New York Public Library and talk to people there about trying to do some research, and they would send me down to the microfilm area to be able to look up the old articles in the original papers at the time. And Ralph, I was opening up little boxes of microfilm that had the original tape on them. No one had ever opened these boxes since they were converted to microfilm, whatever year that might have been.
Wow.
So I'm going through and I'm reading game after game, article after article about these players, and I'm thinking to myself, my gosh, I'm not a hockey historian, but I feel like I'm reading stuff that no one has ever looked at or hasn't looked at in decades and decades. No one's ever done anything with. So it all started to come together, and I decided to write this book about the birth of the New York Rangers in 1926 from the perspective of Murray Murdoch. Murray was a player that I didn't know at all, but as I started to learn about each of the players and delve into their personalities and understand who they were like, I came across Murray. And, you know, a few things stood out. Murray was the only guy on the team that went to college, which just sort of separated him from everybody else as I was doing my research. And then the second thing I noticed was that Murray was the Iron Man of hockey at the time. He had never missed a single game in his career. He played 13 years for the Rangers, never missed a single game. So for that reason alone, I said to myself, wow, Murray's a guy that I want to get to know a lot better, because that's the kind of attitude that I think a reader, you know, could sort of relate to. And then I realized that he lived until he was 96 years old. And I quickly did the math, which I'm not usually very good at, but I realized that he didn't die until 2001, which meant that he was the only guy that was alive for all four of the Rangers Stanley Cups.
Oh, wow.
So that's actually the title of my book, The Last Original Ranger of New York. And then the fourth thing I discovered about Murray was that he's a distant relative of Mark Messier. So once I realized that they were relatives through marriage and that they knew each other in life, that honestly, the story started to write itself. I created a fictional setting where in 1994, in February, while the Rangers are still in the throes of the season, Mark and Murray get together. Mark is now 90 years old at a frozen pond in Westchester. And Murray spends the afternoon reminiscing to Mark in my story about what that first season was like for all these Canadian guys coming down and playing in New York City for the first time.
Well, did they in fact really know each other or get to know each other in real life?
Oh, they absolutely knew each other in real life. In fact, when I reached out to Mark through his agent, who also happens to be his brother-in-law, I explained what I was doing and what I had written. I had already worked on the first couple drafts of this story over a couple years and wanted Mark's input. Obviously, Mark's character in the story, a small one, but an important one. And when I said this to his brother-in-law, he looked at me and he goes, "Oh, you're writing about Murray? That's great."
That's cool.
I'm glad to see Murray's getting some attention. So when Mark was made the captain of the Rangers, I think it was his third game. The first couple games when he was made captain of the Rangers, they were on the road. And the first game when he came to Madison Square Garden, they put a C on his chest. And they had a bit of a ceremony before the game. And a bunch of older previous captains were there. And Murray Murdoch, who had to have been 87 years old at the time, was on the ice there as well, congratulating him. So, you know, they knew each other in life. And, you know, so it was not a huge fictional stretch to have the two of them talking in a frozen pond. But it is, that part of the story is fiction. But almost everything that I wrote about in terms of the game action is all based on my research throughout that whole year.
What was your favorite part of writing the book?
Wow, there were a lot of well, there were a lot of parts that I loved doing. I loved creating the dialogue between the players because it is historical fiction. My goal was to make these players as relatable as possible, but as true to their personalities at the time as they were, as best as I could possibly know them. Obviously, they've all been dead a very long time. I haven't had an opportunity to interview them. Only one of the players, Frankie Boucher, wrote a memoir, which was hugely invaluable for me to get to know him. But none of the other players really left a written legacy that I could do a lot of research on. So I really spent a long time getting to know what these guys were like. And to be able to kind of convey that honestly was a huge responsibility, but it was a lot of fun creating that dialogue and creating those relationships. Again, because I play hockey myself, to be able to describe what it's like to be in a locker room with some guys and have practical jokes. These guys, of course, were riding from city to city in trains. So I lean into that. And probably the most enjoyable part of the book is the fact that, Prohibition was around in 1926. So these guys were hitting speakeasies constantly whenever we go. But especially in New York, they had their favorite places. And I had a lot of fun researching that and creating, fun interchange and exchanges and conversations with these guys in those settings and the people that they would meet there, like Damon Runyon and other people that I know that they actually interacted with in real life.
Wow. Hey, what do you got going? What's your next project? What are you looking forward to?
Well, right now I'm just trying to promote the heck out of this guy because, I really wrote this book with the idea that in 2 years, the Rangers are going to be celebrating their 100th anniversary. And that's in 2026. So obviously the story takes place in 1926. So I feel I have 2 years to really get this story out there to Ranger fans, because I don't think most Ranger fans have any clue at all how the team came about and where we came from and why we still exist. I mean, most Rangers.
It just didn't all start with Les Patrick. Is that what you're saying?
That's right. It all started with Lester Patrick, but even before Lester, most fans don't realize that Connie Smythe was actually our original manager and general manager. He was the guy who originally signed the guys to their original contracts, and then he only lasted a couple weeks in training camp. And I write about that extensively. Like what could he have possibly have done to have forced the Ranger management to intervene and fire him and bring in Lester Patrick to take over the club and to completely change their fortunes. But in Madison Square Garden, the year before the Rangers arrived, the New York Americans, another hockey team, were playing in the Garden. A lot of Ranger fans don't know stuff like this. And that team doesn't exist anymore. They went out of business a long time ago. But I kept asking myself, why is it that the Rangers are about to celebrate their 100th anniversary? What made them special when many other teams have gone by the wayside, have gone out of business over the years? And to me, it came down to those original Rangers, those guys that are on that original roster. That was a special group. They created a foundation for our team that I truly believe has helped us survive 100 years and well beyond. And I really tried to represent them as best I could so the Ranger fans could know who Bill Cook, our first captain, was. Bill Cook was a World War I vet, and he was probably, other than Mark Messier, and probably the greatest captain our team has ever had. And most Ranger fans have never even heard his name. Ching Johnson was this defenseman who was probably the greatest defenseman of his age, bruising, powerful guy, but a heart that, this is a guy that you'd want in the foxhole with you. This is a guy that you wanted on your team. And, he was a violent guy on the ice, but a fair guy. And he stuck up for his players. And I want Ranger fans to know who these players were. So to go back to your original question, I am working on a second novel, but really in the early throes of that. And I hope it comes about, but it's not about sports at all. It'll be related to a Civil War soldier trying to return home after an injury. So trying to take it in a really different direction and challenge my skills as a writer. But my project right now really is over the next couple of years is to make sure that Ranger fans know what we've got with our original team, that when we go to celebrate them, their 100th anniversary in 2026, we're not just celebrating a franchise. We're not just celebrating, hey, the Rangers turned 100. I want Ranger fans to have a much better understanding of who the players were on that team. And frankly, Ralph, those players need to be recognized. That, in all fairness, several of them should be hanging from the rafters in Madison Square Garden. And they're not. They're barely recognized anywhere in the building. But we've got a lot of guys on that original team that won 2 Stanley Cups with the Rangers, 2 Stanley Cups with the Rangers, and are in the Hockey Hall of Fame, and they're not hanging from the rafters. There's no one hanging from the rafters at Madison Square Garden for the Rangers that have those credentials. So how is Bill Cook? How is Bunny Cook? How is Ching Johnson not hanging from the rafters? Lester Patrick and Frankie Boucher, their names are on 3 of the 4 Ranger Stanley Cups. How are they not hanging from the rafters, Ralph?
Incredible. And there haven't been many Stanley Cups for the Rangers, God knows. So tell me about your business career. What was that like? Sports licensing?
I was probably one of the most fortunate guests you will ever have on your show. Right out of college, I started working for a gentleman who was one of the early founding guys in the sports memorabilia business in the 1980s. Rumor has it he had the first trading card show in his house. His name was Mike Ehrenstein. And I went to work for him and was his first employee. And it wasn't that long before I was there for 32 years. And we had at the end, we had. You all right, Ralph?
I am.
Too many people at dispensary, is it?
Well, you know.
How'd you guess? Brian knows what's going on in San Francisco. We're in the land of good and plenty. You got to excuse us.
It's a good life, Brian. What can I tell you?
Yeah, you have to excuse Zig. He has to pick up his lung. It's over there next to your foot.
See, Paulie's playing with me. He said, cough as much as you'd like. No one can hear you. And then I coughed, and sure enough.
So the company I worked for was called Photophile. And honestly, as a sports fan, and I know you are, you probably have our product in your house someplace. We were a licensee just like Topps or any other company that produced products, and we did sports photography. We manufactured licensed sports photos of every player in every sport for 3 decades and sold a lot of them. So my guess is if you've got photos hanging up in your house, perhaps some photos that players have signed or in frames or plaques, so there's a very strong possibility that if you look in the lower left-hand corner, you'll see a little Photophile logo along with the league licensing, and that was something that we were blessed to do and provide for customers for over 3 decades. So it was a real joy. And in my role there, I was able to hire people and sort of build out the company and set our direction. And the fact that I had 3 decades where I worked with some of the greatest people that I'll ever know in my life, I don't know a lot of people who get to say that about their career. So I'm well aware of how lucky I was for over 3 decades to be surrounded by good people. I like to think I went to work every day, excited to get there and did fun stuff. So it's a great job.
Brian, I don't know if you know this. I was the West Coast representative for Topps, and I would sign players to their contracts, so when they reach the majors, we get to pay them and what have you. So I want to know if you've ever been associated with Topps, or if you got to meet anybody with Topps.
Sure. We didn't have a lot to overlap with Topps, but I certainly, we certainly connected with each other. I was sending out photographers to the same places they were. So very often we were battling for photo credentials.
Right.
But
Right.
yeah, no, listen, I had a lot of respect for Tops. I always thought Tops was the best, frankly, and you know, their their direction went much in the same direction that Photophile went in terms of how the economy changed and the players that came into the sport and how sales were conducted on a company wide level. So yeah, I love Tops. Yeah.
What did you learn when that you didn't know when you got into the business that you were surprised by?
In sports marketing and
Yeah.
sports licensing,
Yeah.
I think we were talking before about the players and how hockey players are very approachable and genuine, and I think that as I got to meet more and more players over the years, I found that to be true for most sports. To be honest with you, I mean, there's always guys that aren't so pleasant or cantankerous, or maybe you don't want to sit down and hang out with. But truthfully, I was very happy in my career to be able to sit down and have a beer with the likes of Ted Williams or Ernie Bank, Brooks Robinson. Be able to sit down and talk with those guys. That was pretty special, and a lot of players that followed them obviously got to spend time with them as well. And more often than not, I found they were, pretty approachable, pretty genuinely nice people. If you respected them and you respected their space, I found that they were very often really good people. I think that was probably the thing that surprised me the most.
Who
I
was
expected,
especially open with you and communicative?
uh, gosh, I mean, that would be a long list. But I remember one time meeting Ricky Henderson and having always just heard terrible things about Ricky. He's got an attitude. He's hard to approach or anything. But as I was approaching him one time, he was interacting with a kid, and he just couldn't have been more genuine when he was talking to this young child. Who was probably like 12, 13 years old, and I struck up a conversation with him right after that, and he and I just really enjoyed my conversation. I wasn't prepared for that. I wasn't expecting Ricky Henderson to be such a really warm, relatable human being. I just, in the press in New York, especially, they wrote him really hard, made him sound not always in the most flattering light. And I was really pleased when I got to spend time with him that was not the case at all. He's a super guy.
That's
And
nice to hear.
yeah,
Because, if a player relates to kids, that got to tell you something right there. That, because isn't that what it's all about? Um, what was it like for you
yeah.
growing up as a kid?
Growing up as a kid, it was well. Listen, I didn't play a lot of sports when I was really young. I don't think I was particularly coordinated when I was very young, and I think learning for me was a bit of a challenge as well. So I had to spend a little more time than most kids, I think. So I'm really proud of myself that I've actually written this book, because I remember as a really young kid, frankly, having a really hard time learning how to read and write. So the fact that all these years later, 55 years after learning, trying to learn how to read and write, to be able to actually publish a book and maybe be able to continue to do that, I think is a great sense of reward for me personally. And the fact that I am very fortunate that physically I have a lot of fun these days. I've got a big ski trip coming up with my son. Very much looking forward to that. The fact that like I said, still play hockey. So very blessed that I'm still able to do these things at 59.
What kind of music did you like when you were a kid? Just
Oh,
like to get to know you a little bit.
sure. I imagine very much the same kind of music you liked. I'm just guessing. But no, growing up, classic, what we would now call classic rock, was very much on my turntable.
Hold on, are you judging a album by its cover with Zig? What's going on here? Sorry, I just
Very
every once in a while I've got to chime in, Zig.
That's
Thanks,
all right.
Walt.
That's
That's
all
my
right.
job, right?
That it's your job to make it an interesting show, and you've
That's
done
right.
that.
There you go.
All right. Okay.
But what kind of music? So, album rock, classic rock. Where were you at?
Yeah, no, very much. I mean, gosh, The Who, Led Zeppelin, Stones. I mean, you name it. I was not a fan of pop music so much. What I always called bubblegum pop. Probably you would not find that in my vinyl collection. But beyond that, you know, Fleetwood Mac and bands of that ilk. I was very happy to buy their vinyl and have still to this day play vinyl and love it. I'm glad I rediscovered vinyl a few years ago. So I've been trying to rebuild my record collection as a little hobby on the side as well.
So, are you a headphones only kind of guy?
No, I have a little chair that I like to sit in and play it a little too loud that my wife complains sometimes.
Oh, you pretend like you're the guy from the Maxell commercial.
Fortunately, she likes the same music I do, but yes, just
Yeah. You were frozen there. I think I cut you off because you were frozen there for a second, but you got that point. Yeah, exactly. It sounds like he's looking at our black light poster stuff that's on our walls. We literally have the Beatles, the Doors, Stevie Ray Vaughan. Yeah, I mean, you're basically looking at the inside of our studio. So
yeah,
it's kind of cool.
If I don't mention Bob Marley and the Beatles, my son's girlfriend would be very angry with me. So I'm sliding their.
I'm looking at a Bob Marley redemption song poster. So yeah, you're speaking our language.
Thank you. Good.
If you didn't get into sports marketing originally, what would have you done? What was your passion?
That's a great question. I actually went to college and got degrees in criminal justice and sociology. So, man, two degrees that really have not applied much in my career at all. But maybe I would have ended up becoming a police officer or something. But I think I found my passion. I think I found something that I really love doing, and I'm very grateful that I ended up where I did, right where I was supposed to be, I suppose. And I'm certainly grateful that I wrote this book now, and hopefully be able to share something with Ranger fans. Ralph and Paul, if you don't mind, just going back to the book for a second. One thing I do want to say is that I actually didn't write the book for hockey fans. I actually wrote the book for anybody to read. It's historical fiction, so my hope was that anybody could pick up this book and fall in love with it because they fall in love with the characters and they fall in love with the plot. It's a little bit like a book like, well, I hope a little tiny bit in a small way like Water for Elephants, where you don't have to be a fan of the circus in order to love that book, because you love the characters and you love where the story takes you. And that's what I tried to do with this book as well. So it's a bonus for hockey fans, super bonus for Ranger fans, because they're going to find out all kinds of stuff they wouldn't have otherwise known. But my hope is that anybody who loves to read and who loves historical fiction will pick this book up and just really appreciate it because of the characters.
And this is what we call a crossover book, right? So you're trying to capture both audiences.
Yeah, I didn't write it for one specific audience. I did not write this book specifically for Ranger fans or specifically for hockey fans. I wrote this book for a much wider audience than that and tried to make it completely accessible to them, which was a real challenge for me because I write about a lot of hockey in this book. And but my biggest challenge was making sure that every time I wrote about a game and wrote about the action, that people wouldn't get bored. I mean, there's a lot of game action in this book, and I couldn't have it become repetitive. And so every game for me had to be about character development. Every time there's a game going on, it has to be about us learning something about the characters in the book. What happens when they're in a fight? What happens when, the puck's at the, right on the crease line? How hard are they fighting for it? Everything I wrote about in the game is really revealing not so much about the score of the game, but more about the players and what their commitment to each other is all about. So that's where I was really headed with the book and trying to make it accessible for everybody.
Brian, let me ask you this as a fellow author. Was there a time when you weren't just writing a book, when you had it in your head that I'm an author? Was there a crossover there that where you realized, wow, I got it? What was that for you?
Well, yeah. So I'm just going to take out the word "wow." I'm an author because I'm too humble to say that. But there was a moment when I realized that I had something, because I have written short stories that I've never published before, and Ralph, I know you've published, so maybe you felt this way, maybe you haven't, maybe it's universal for all authors, I don't know. But Paul, I'll say this to you: when I wrote this first book, and I realized that I was going to publish it, you get very afraid, because for me at least, it felt like I was going to be standing naked in front of a whole bunch of strangers, and it's a very intimidating, uncomfortable feeling, knowing that your work is going to be out there for people to read and judge. But Ralph, to go back to your question, there was a moment, and that was when I had finished the first draft of this novel, and I didn't know if I had anything or not. I felt really good about it. I felt like, I used the term, I felt like I landed the plane. I literally took the plane in and landed it right where I wanted to in terms of its conclusion and how it wrapped up, and felt so super good about it. And so I gave the first draft to the person I trust most in life, which is my wife. And I asked her to read it. And I know that Tia would have been completely honest with me if she had read the first draft and said, and this is what I was expecting, well, Brian, it's not terrible for a first draft. That's
support. That's love.
Yeah, but that's what I was expecting, and that's not what I got. That's not what I got. What I got was, I want to think about this for a couple of days. She finished reading it real quick. She read it real fast, and I asked her, well, what'd you think? She said, give me a couple of days to digest it and think about it. So I didn't bring it up again. And then a couple of nights later, we're at dinner, and she looks at me and she goes, all right, I'm ready to tell you what I think. And I said, bring it. And she said, I miss it. I miss the characters. I wish it wasn't over. I'd like to know more about them. I find that now that I've read the book, read the first draft, that I am missing the characters. And I said, wow, that's
absolutely, that is the highest compliment. When I read a book and I say, wow, how am I going to adjust when this book ends? You hit it right on the head.
And you guys have a different skill set than I do. So I'm a writer, and I'm a writer and stand-up comedian. And so everything that I write is basically something I perform, and most of the time it's a monologue that's timely based on whatever news cycle or whatever's going on. So I kind of do put it out there, but I think I would love to write a book. I would love to write a book and make it more fictional, so it's not like what I perform, I guess. I would love to tell a story and something in the fictional realm. So, but you guys have that skill set that you have to, you can form and shape, and I guess mine is kind of like an evolution, but you guys have a final. I don't ever have a final draft, I guess. Whenever I have a final draft, I guess you should put me 6 feet under.
Well, you should put your stuff down on paper, because you're very elegant.
Well, it's on paper, but it's on like bar napkins,
right,
and little squares of paper and Post-it notes and
right,
index cards, and it's everywhere else. But yeah, you're right. It should be. But the problem is with that, if you're a comedian and you're writing a book and that's why it has to be fictional. It can't be non-fictional, because otherwise it's like I'm an authority about something.
Mm.
And it's definitely not maybe about writing or stand-up or performing. Maybe humility. That would be good. I'd be good at humility. So get me down for those. But enough about me. It's you guys. More about you guys.
Brian, tell me about your next project a little bit.
So I am trying to write a book about a soldier who's been badly injured in Georgia, Union soldier, towards the end of the war, and it's about his journey back north. And I'm the book is less than 100 pages in, and like I said before, I'm not sure if I'm going to hit the landing or not. I hope that I do. I really do believe that I have books in me. I think I can keep doing this. I get a great joy out of writing. That creative feeling, I can't seem to replicate that in other ways, and I really love writing, and I really want to keep it going. So I'm hoping that in time, I'm going to give myself, I don't have a deadline on this, of course, but I'm just going to let those creative juices keep flowing, and hopefully in a couple of years, be able to have a second novel with my name on it. That would be pretty special.
What was it like for you when the books arrived that day? I can't tell you the high I got opening it up. I knew it was a book, and just looking at it. Was it the same for you?
You bet, Ralph. You bet. You bet. I found a great guy to make my cover for me, and when it arrived, and I felt it, and the texture of the paper felt so good, far better than I anticipated. And you hold it and you feel the thickness of it, because I'm writing on a computer, right? I mean, even if I print it out, on 8.5 by 11-inch sheets of paper, it's not the same, but when you have the book and it's, 6 by 9 inches and soft cover, and, you feel the texture of it. Oh man, that's a special feeling. No question.
Yeah.
No question. Beautiful feeling. Yeah. Loved it.
It's like winning it all.
I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to say I had it, I was crying, but it was a very emotional moment when I opened up that packet, and there it was looking at me.
Yeah, I noticed that you used the description, the high you got, not how high you got when you got your book.
Yeah.
So, but it's like a drug, right? It's literally,
and it makes you want to chase that second book.
Yeah, absolutely. And the truth is, sometimes when I'm really in the zone, when I'm really writing, I could be writing for a few hours, and when I go to stop, I'll go back and read what I wrote. Honestly, there's times where I read stuff and I have no memory of even writing that. I don't know where that came from. How did I put that on my computer? I don't even remember typing those words. And that happened countless times in writing this first novel. So that was a really, really great experience to be hitting that. And
interesting that you mentioned the zone. Being in the zone is different for everyone, and but there are similarities where for everybody, and just the way you inflected it, you were in the zone. People who have never been in the zone will never know.
Right.
And whatever it is, sports, politics,
music,
it all comes together.
Yeah.
And glad you got to experience that. Why? Because you're a good guy, and you mentioned that you're humble, and you are, and that's what it takes. I'm glad you came on the show.
Thank you.
Okay.
Believe me, I'm very, very, very grateful that you've had me on. Believe me.
Believe me, can't wait to get you back sometime.
And I look forward to meeting you someday. That'd be even better.
Absolutely. Come out to the studio.
Here we would love to have you here, beautiful San Francisco.
Downtown San Francisco. You'd love it. Believe me.
Oh, I've been there. It's a great city. I'm very fond of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how do we keep up with everything that you're doing, Brian? How do we get your books? How do we keep up with everything you're doing? Website, Amazon, what are we doing?
Yeah, thank you. No, absolutely.
If you give us a place to find you, what's your website?
Yeah, so my novel's on both Amazon and Barnes & Noble. Again, the name of the book is The Last Original Ranger of New York. You could look it up by the title or by my name, Brian Riley, which, thank you, spelled correctly up in the corner there.
Woohoo!
appreciate that, Paul. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Of course, people are welcome to follow me on Instagram or my Facebook page. But the book is on Amazon and Barnes and Noble, and so people are welcome to find it right there. And desperately need more reviews. The reviews I have been outstanding. Frankly, I'm shocked at how really good the reviews are. I wasn't prepared for.
Well, let us affirm. You were saying that you don't know if you're an author. You're an author, man.
Well, yeah, but that. Yes, I guess
you got to look in the mirror, wake up every morning, give yourself that positive affirmation, and say, "I am an author. I'm gonna make this happen today."
Yeah, it's absolutely. Just still trying to wrap my brain around the fact that I've accomplished that goal. So,
and I look forward to your next book. That's going to be interesting, man. It's going to be really
Thanks.
interesting.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm hoping that I just keep writing about things that I feel like I'm knowledgeable about. The first book being, hockey and the 1920s are two passions of mine, but the Civil War and hiking are two others, and who knows, maybe I've got a future book beyond that has scuba diving and I don't know, archaeology or something mixed in there together. But I just want to keep writing about things that I love doing and things that I love that I'm passionate about. So hopefully that brings an authenticity to it and something that the reader enjoys.
I think following your passion is always genuine. So
absolutely, passion and interesting people are a good combination. Interesting people with a passion, and you qualify, Brian. Thank you.
Oh. Thanks for hanging out with us, man. We got 10 minutes left in podcast. What do you have looking? Do you have any events or gigs that you're doing looking forward? Do you do book signings, or what do you do?
I'm trying to. It's hard to get a book signing, frankly. I've been going to the Barnes and Nobles around me, and they seem less than enthusiastic about it. So I'm going to start tapping some of the local libraries and see if I can't make that happen at some point, because I would like to just sort of get in front of people and talk to them about the novel and do that. I do have a charity event coming up next month for that I've been asked to be a part of. One of my hockey teammates has a charity that he's involved with, and he's asked me to bring a bunch of books to sign and help both raffle off and try and raise money for this event. So I'm excited to be doing that as well, and doing interviews wherever I can, and podcasts whenever somebody asks, which I'm really have enjoyed. The first one I did was with George Grimm, which was such a pleasure, and enjoyed this one as well, believe me. So I'm just going to keep trying to promote it as best I can and keep plugging away at it.
Right on.
Beautiful. My hat's off to George Grimm again. He and I wrote the book we wrote together, and like I say, he gave me the opportunity to look at that box of books and open it up, and the look on your face, you nodded, you know what I meant, and they can't take that away from us.
Yeah.
So let's keep it going. What's your website officially?
Well, I don't have a website. I'm just on both on Facebook and Instagram, and people can certainly find me there. That's perfectly fine. I'm happy to, anybody who wants to follow along, they're happy to do so.
Good. Thank you, Brian, for being here. You're terrific.
Thank you.
All
really
right.
appreciate it.
Thank you, Brian. We'll see you next time. Again, that was Brian Riley, and I almost said his name wrong.
Right. Well, good thing you put it up there.
Yeah, it's a good thing I put it up there. I also put your book up there a little late.
That's all right. Little late, better late than never.
I'm telling you.
And it took me 75 years to write it. So it might take you a little.
It's not like you're one of these young kids now that have AI writing everything for them.
No, that's another thing. We talked about that, and you and I watched George Carlin on AI.
Yeah, the AI George Carlin special.
Doesn't work.
It doesn't work for you.
Not George Carlin.
And it was that day. It was that day, folks, that Zig told me, "Do not keep my head in a jar after I go." He goes, I do not want my head in a jar. I will not be a robot. I will not be reanimated. 150
Right.
years from now.
Well, I'm going to have very little control over what happens when I go, just as I have very little control of what happens when I stay. So it's not going to be anything more than it is. Paulie, tell me about Edge Studios a little more.
Oh, sure, man. I've got so many things going on. We're just trying to get people in here. We're trying to get people creating whatever their passion is. We were just talking to both Brian and Ian, and they have passions. You have a passion. We all have a passion. My passion is to help others create, to realize their dream. Like Zig here. Zig was doing a podcast. He was doing it in multiple places, but most of the time he was doing it in his home, recording it, uploading it. It was great. It was a form of expression, but here we go. It's not a revolution so much as an evolution, right? We're kind of reinventing and moving forward for what we do.
Being able to see the expressions on the guest's face,
right,
is unbelievably fulfilling to me, because it's a different form of communication than just the podcast. I'm really enjoying this. Seven in the bag. After
7
this.
in the bag. You got it.
Better than saying in the can, I think.
Yeah. No. Absolutely.
And we're
because half the time we are in the bag.
Certainly, and proud of it. Paulie, keep improving it for me.
I will.
Every week it gets better and better. There's a little nuance, and I look back at the old ones and I go, "Wow, they were good. These are better."
That was literally a month ago.
Yeah, 7 more than a month.
Yeah. So what? Oh yeah, almost 2 months at this point.
Yeah,
it's crazy. It's wild what we're doing, man. I've been enjoying our time together, and I've been enjoying meeting all your friends, man. These guys are really cool, and the knowledge they bring about sports, everything from hockey now and baseball and everything, but then just life, politics.
Yeah, I was going to say, we talk
right?
a little life in there, and we talk sports that are life, not just statistics.
Right.
And I think what we're doing is really good, and I'm proud of it, and I'm happy to be associated with Edge Studios.
And I'm happy, and I'm proud. You're like a son. You're like a son. You're like my spawn. See what I've unleashed onto the world. I've given you Zig.
Since
in
then,
full high definition.
Such as it is. Such as it is.
There you go.
Hey, Paulie, take us out, and I think we've talked enough that they've heard us.
Even so much, I was just putting your last guest again. Thanks for Brian Riley joining us, as well as Ian Kahanowitz. There we go. I appreciate it. Zig, yeah, we're going to take us out like only we can. We're out of here, dude. And we'll see you guys next week here. Zig in the Zone.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome, buddy.